Chapter 1. The Awards Ceremony Venue. The moment Jessica's husband redirected her resources to his crush Fiona for the 33rd time, the system, which had been missing for 5 years, reappeared. Host. You failed to fulfill the agreement to win Best Actress. You will be terminated in 10 days. 10 days. That day would be the Qingming Festival. Jessica's eyelashes trembled slightly. Phineas, noticing her low spirits, gently stroked the back of her hand. Theo saved my life. Just let her have this one. I promise the next one will be yours. It was the first time Phineas had ever shown her affection in public. Yet Jessica felt no joy at all. She stared at their interlocked hands, the system's cold words echoing in her mind, her chest a frozen void. Phineas, 5 years of marriage, you've made countless promises of next time. As for the future, but I don't have a future anymore. Late at night, in the Song family's villa, the living room was pitch dark. Jessica sat on the sofa, staring blankly at the night beyond the floor-to-ceiling window. Why aren't the lights on? Phineas stood at the entrance, flicked the switch, and the room was instantly flooded with light. Jessica concealed her emotions, stood up to greet him, and took his coat. I forgot. Phineas's brows furrowed slightly. Every time Fiona won an award, Jessica would make a scene. Fiona had saved his life. As Mrs. Song, why couldn't Jessica show a little grace to his savior? Though Phineas didn't say a word, Jessica still felt the faint disgust radiating from him. She silently patted down the coat and was just about to hang it up, when a pearl earring fell out from its pocket. Jessica paused, then bent down and picked it up. This pearl earring was the very one Fiona wore on the red carpet earlier today. Phineas stepped into the living room, seeing her standing by the door in a daze. His tone turned impatient. What is it now? Nothing. Go get some rest. Jessica forced herself to suppress her emotions. With trembling fingers, she placed the earring back into the coat pocket, then carefully hung the coat. Phineas despised her lifeless demeanor the most. Whatever interest he had in speaking vanished. With a cold expression, he went upstairs directly to his study. Jessica stared at his retreating back for a long moment before returning to the bedroom. On the desk lay a printed divorce agreement, neatly placed. Jessica stepped forward and picked it up, reading it in silence for a long time. Once she confirmed everything was correct, she tucked it into the drawer. The next morning, as Jessica came downstairs with the divorce agreement in hand, she saw Phineas leading Fiona inside and involuntarily stopped in her tracks. Phineas's voice was cold. Fiona will be staying with us this month. No extra explanation, like he was issuing a command. Jessica felt a stab in her heart and was just about to speak. Fiona, eyes full of triumph, spoke in a sweet voice. Sis-in-law, the location for my new drama shoot happens to be nearby. Sorry for the inconvenience these days. Oh right. I won another award. Come, let me share some of my luck with you. Beaming, she walked over with her trophy and deliberately lowered her voice so only the two of them could hear. Everything you fought so hard for, Phineas gave it all to me in the end. What do you have to compete with me? With that, she gracefully returned to Phineas's side. Jessica clenched the divorce papers so tightly that the edges were crumpled and deformed. The lead role in the drama was originally hers, but Phineas had directly asked the director to give it to Fiona, Best Actress. The drama role, even that wasn't enough. Now Phineas was letting Fiona move into their home? Jessica felt a surge of bitterness. Her eyes grew warm. 5 years, 33 stolen resources. Proof of Phineas's indifference to her, and his blatant favoritism toward Fiona. Perhaps she had been silent for too long. Fiona tugged on Phineas's sleeve. Phineas, forget it. Sis-in-law doesn't seem too happy. Maybe I should just go? Phineas gently stroked her head. His eyes filled with a tenderness Jessica had never seen before. No need. Then, he turned to Jessica. Voice icy. I won't repeat myself. Jessica blinked away the tears, forcing them back, and handed the agreement to Phineas. Phineas, let's get a divorce. Chapter 2. The living room fell into sudden silence. Phineas stared at the black and white print of the divorce agreement, his eyes narrowing sharply. What are you throwing a tantrum about this time? His gaze was ice cold. Jessica felt a sting in her chest, an unnameable bitterness spreading through her entire body. Phineas, I'm not making a scene. I've thought about this divorce for a long time. With those words, Jessica no longer looked at him. She walked upstairs step by step and returned to the bedroom. It had been 5 years. She was a living, breathing person, capable of sadness, of pain, of tears, and of exhaustion. Phineas looked at her retreating back in disbelief. When he finally came to his senses, he hurried after her. The bedroom door was shut tight. He raised his hand and knocked, his voice lacking its usual calm. "Jessica, come out. Let's talk." There was no response, but he could hear the faint sound of suitcase wheels. Phineas seemed to realize something. His expression changed slightly. In the end, he simply tightened his grip on the divorce papers and stood silently at the door to wait. He didn't know how long had passed before the door finally opened. Looking up, he saw Jessica with light makeup, dressed in a bright red coat that made her look stunning beyond words. "Phineas, I'm leaving. Once you've signed the divorce papers, send them directly to my lawyer." Jessica wheeled her suitcase past him, her clear eyes never pausing on his face. Fiona's eyes lit up with delight. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The position of Mrs. Song should have always belonged to her. Phineas stepped forward, grabbing Jessica's wrist, unable to hold back his words. "Jessica, why? Is it because of Fiona? She saved my life. You're Mrs. Song. What don't you have? Why must you compete with her?" Jessica stopped walking but didn't look back. She slowly withdrew her hand and replied with just 2 words. "Take care." Jessica was really gone, so calmly, so lightly, that Phineas couldn't quite process it for a long time. He flipped open the divorce agreement. When his eyes fell on the bolded clause marked compensation to the wife, his gaze darkened. Fiona walked over, her face wearing a deliberately contrite expression. "Phineas, it's all my fault. I didn't expect sis-in-law to have such hostility toward me. I think staying here might be." She trailed off on purpose, confident that since Phineas had helped her 33 times already, he wouldn't refuse her this time either. And now that Jessica was gone, she could use this time to turn fiction into reality. Lowering her eyes, Fiona couldn't help but smile slightly, just waiting for Phineas's agreement. But instead, she heard Phineas speak solemnly. "It really isn't appropriate for you to stay here. I'll rent you a place in the complex." Fiona froze. The smile on her face stiffened. After a long pause, she mumbled, "All right. Thank you, Phineas." Phineas called for the housekeeper to make arrangements and said no more to Fiona. He left for the office directly. Fiona stared at the cold attitude Phineas had never shown her before, clenching her teeth in frustration, her hatred toward Jessica growing even deeper. This was the first time in 5 years of marriage that Phineas left work early. But he didn't return to the villa, he went straight to the old Song family estate. The moment he stepped through the gates, he saw Mother Song standing at the doorway, craning her neck to look. Seeing Phineas alone, she asked in surprise, "Where's Jessica?" Today was the day Phineas and Jessica were supposed to come home for dinner. Normally at this time, Jessica would have arrived early to help prepare the meal for the family. Phineas paused, silent for a long moment, before saying, "Jessica filed for divorce. She moved out." Mother Song was momentarily stunned, then broke into a broad smile. "Good. She's just an actress. How could she ever be good enough for you? You should marry someone from a proper family." She conveniently forgot that Jessica had once been the daughter of the prestigious Lee family. It was only after the lease went bankrupt that Jessica entered the entertainment industry to repay debts. "Phineas, that daughter from the old Lee family is quite nice. You two should meet sometime." As Mother Song went on enthusiastically, Phineas found her voice more and more grating. He suddenly stood up and walked out. In the courtyard, the flowering peach tree was ablaze with color, clusters of vivid red blooms covering the branches. Phineas stared at the overlapping red petals, momentarily lost in thought. In a flash, he remembered that Jessica had also been wearing red when she left the villa. Late that night, Phineas returned to the villa, exhausted. As he passed the master bedroom, he stopped instinctively. He pushed the door open, only to be met with complete darkness. It was at that moment he truly felt it. Jessica was really gone. He flipped on the light switch, flooding the room with brightness. Looking up, he saw that where their wedding photo once hung, there was now only a bare, white wall. Chapter 3. Phineas walked in and looked around, but there wasn't the slightest trace that Jessica had ever been there. Jessica's words, "I've thought about the divorce for a long time," echoed in his mind again without warning. Phineas had never imagined Jessica would leave so decisively. A sleepless night. The next morning, the housekeeper laid out breakfast on the table. Phineas sat down and took a bite with his usual elegance, only to frown. He set down his chopsticks and swept a cold glance at the housekeeper. "Jessica's gone. And your cooking went downhill with her?" The housekeeper stepped forward and respectfully replied, "Mr. Song, the breakfast you usually eat was prepared personally by Madam. She would start simmering the broth 3 hours in advance." Hearing this, Phineas's eyes darkened. He instantly lost his appetite and got up to leave. For several days, Phineas buried himself in work, trying to numb himself and escape Jessica's lingering presence. That day, in the CEO's office, it was already 5 in the afternoon by the time he finished dealing with everything. He opened his phone, hesitated for 2 seconds, then his eyes lingered on the friend group chat Jessica was part of. He sent a message, JY. 6 o'clock, JY Club. Phineas's phone vibrated on the table. He picked it up quickly to check. It was a call from Fiona. Even he didn't notice that the light in his eyes dimmed a bit when he saw it wasn't Jessica. One of his childhood friends teased him. "Phineas, your little wifey is calling. Why aren't you answering?" Phineas put the phone down and asked in a low voice, "What little wifey?" His friend wiggled his eyebrows at him and joked, "Jessica's the main wife. Fiona's the little one." Obviously. Phineas's expression turned cold as he snapped, "What nonsense are you spouting? Fiona saved my life. I see her as a sister." The friend rolled his eyes discreetly. "You handed over your wife's resources to your sister, let the rumors run wild without a word of clarification, and now expect anyone to believe it's all innocent?" Still, he didn't dare say that out loud and quickly changed the subject. "Phineas, why'd you invite us in the big group chat today? Did your wife approve? Didn't you used to only use the 4-person group?" Phineas had stomach problems, and Jessica had specially studied medicinal recipes to help him manage it. Normally, she wouldn't let him drink much. 3 years ago, his friends had pressured him into drinking, and Jessica showed up and took 10 shots on his behalf. It nearly cost her life. Since then, his friends realized Jessica wasn't an ordinary woman, and no one dared to push Phineas to drink again. Phineas knew very well that Jessica didn't truly want a divorce, she just wanted to use this chance to force him to stay away from Fiona. "She got upset with me and went back to H-City to visit her mom." Silence filled the private room. His friends exchanged awkward glances and asked, "Phineas, didn't her mom pass away 3 months ago? That nursing home caught fire, it was all over the news." Phineas's pupils contracted sharply. He stood there frozen, unable to process it. Seeing his reaction, his friends were surprised. "Phineas, you really didn't know?" His mind went blank. He abruptly stood up and walked out of the room. Once in the car, Phineas turned to the front and asked his secretary, "Did you know about Jessica's mother passing away?" 3 months later, the sudden question caught the secretary off guard. She paused before replying, "Yes." Phineas's hand, resting by his side, clenched slightly. His voice turned icy. "Why didn't you tell me? Mr. Song, you were in Switzerland skiing with Miss Fiona at the time. As soon as I mentioned Madam, you," the secretary didn't dare finish the sentence. Phineas remembered. Fiona had lost her balance and he had helped steady her. Someone happened to take a photo, and it went viral. His grandfather had scolded him over it. When the secretary mentioned Jessica, he had assumed she was throwing a tantrum after seeing the scandal and told the secretary to ignore it. He hadn't realized. Now he understood why. After he returned to the country and explained that he was just on a business trip and ran into Fiona by chance, Jessica reacted so indifferently. After that, she always seemed sorrowful, and her attitude toward him grew colder. He found her contact in his phone. His finger hovered for a moment. Then he turned off the screen. "Tell Jessica I need to see her. The divorce agreement has issues and needs revisions." Then, awkwardly, he added, "Let her know Fiona's not living at the house." The secretary quickly agreed. Maybe he was just too used to being pursued, too used to holding the reins. Phineas pushed down the thought of contacting Jessica himself. He didn't believe that a woman who had gotten up 3 hours early every day for 5 years to cook him breakfast could really leave so cleanly. And besides, she was just a washed-up actress. Without him, how could she survive? Phineas absent-mindedly got out of the car, only to see a charming woman in a red coat standing at the villa gate. Chapter 4. 5 days. Phineas finally saw her come back. His eyes lit up. He strode forward and grabbed the woman's wrist. Just about to speak, Fiona turned around and called out joyfully, "Phineas G.E., you're finally back." Phineas swallowed the name Jessica that was on the tip of his tongue and let go of the hand. "Why are you here?" Fiona's face was filled with concern. "I heard sis-in-law hasn't returned yet, so I was worried you couldn't take care of yourself." She slowly lifted her hand, fingers gently brushing against the cold side of Phineas's face. "Phineas, you've lost so much weight. Let me take care of you. If sis-in-law came back and saw you like this, imagine how much her heart would ache." With her delicate makeup, Fiona stood in the doorway, attracting frequent glances from passers-by. Suddenly, Phineas recalled what his childhood friends had said. He quietly stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Fio, you're a popular actress. Don't let scandals ruin your reputation. Be mindful of your privacy." "Phineas, I don't mind. I know you love me. That's why you gave me all of Jessica's resources." "I mind." Phineas cut her off coldly. "I helped you because you saved my life. I promised to make you famous, nothing more. You can leave now." He didn't spare her a glance, didn't wait for whatever she wanted to say next, and turned to walk straight into the villa. In the living room, it was cold and empty. That familiar figure who always sat on the sofa waiting for him was gone. Phineas leaned against the spot Jessica used to favor. When he closed his eyes, Fiona's words echoed in his ears. "You love me, so you took everything from Jessica and gave it to me." His chest tightened for no reason. The secretary approached, speaking in a hushed tone, "Mr. Song." "Madam." Phineas snapped his eyes open, facing his sharp gaze. The secretary hesitated before continuing. "Madam can't be reached. Her brother, Oliver," said. Phineas's expression darkened, his tone turning cold. "Speak." Startled by his irritation, the secretary quickly spilled everything. He said Madam has late-stage pancreatic cancer. He's asking you to get a specialist for treatment. He also said there's nothing to change in the divorce agreement. After all the resources you stole from her to give to Fiona, if you have even a shred of conscience, you should give the compensation to her immediately. Now that she's sick. Phineas listened in silence, his face growing colder by the second. "If I'm not mistaken, Jessica's health check 7 days ago came back perfectly fine." The secretary gave an awkward grunt of acknowledgement. He hadn't expected Jessica to curse herself with cancer just for money. Phineas's expression darkened drastically. He pressed his tongue against his back molars and sneered coldly. When had Jessica become this calculating? Every word now seemed to revolve around resources, compensation, and she even fabricated a cancer diagnosis just to secure money. She didn't dare ask for it herself. So she sent her family? Phineas looked at the secretary and squeezed out each word. "Tell him, if she wants money, wants property, wants an island, then let Jessica come get it herself." 5 days. No calls, no messages. She even ignored him when they crossed paths at the bar. Now the first thing she sends is a demand for money? And he had actually thought he owed her something? If she wanted to hide, he wouldn't let her. First People's Hospital of H City. Jessica's brother Oliver clenched his fists in fury after listening to the voice message from Phineas's secretary. He flipped to Phineas's contact, ready to curse him out. But then a weak, confused voice cut in. "Oliver, why am I here?" Oliver's head shot up, eyes widening at the sight of Jessica lying in the hospital bed. Looking dazed, his eyes instantly turned red. He grabbed Jessica's hand and asked urgently, "Sis, are you feeling okay anywhere else?" As he spoke, he thought again of Jessica's condition. The tears he'd fought back began to fall again. Seeing Oliver's distressed expression, a sharp pain suddenly shot through Jessica's head. And then, the system's cold voice rang out. "Host, your punishment is late-stage pancreatic cancer. After 5 days of suffering, you will be terminated at 4:44 p.m. on April 4th. Chapter 5. The emotionless metallic voice brought Jessica slowly back to the memories of everything that had happened recently. On the 10th day of her life countdown, she had taken the initiative to ask Phineas for a divorce and returned to H City to visit the only family she had left, her younger brother, Oliver. But just as she arrived at the doorstep, her vision went black, and she fainted. When she regained consciousness, it was already now. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door, and a nurse walked in. "Miss Lee, the medical fees can't be delayed any longer. They must be paid today." Jessica quickly reached for the phone on the bedside table, but Oliver stopped her, his eyes red. Oliver turned to the nurse and said, "Okay, I'll go pay soon." Jessica thought of something and suddenly asked, "Oliver, are we short on money?" Oliver wiped his tears and gave a silent nod, eyes still red. Jessica's savings had already been spent in the past few days. Oliver was just a high school junior. He didn't even have enough money to cover a single day in the ICU. Oliver muttered, "Sis, I'll sell the house and use the money to treat you." Jessica remained calm, her voice gentle as she comforted him. "We'll talk about it later. For now, arrange for my discharge. I want to go home." During her marriage, Phineas had stripped her of all her resources and given them to Fiona. Most of the money she had went toward paying off the Lee family's debts. The Lee family house held the memories of their family and was Oliver's only place to call home. She only had 5 days left to live. There was no point in sacrificing the house for her. Oliver's eyes welled up again as he blurted out, "No way. You." Jessica forced herself to sit up and said calmly, "Don't worry. I'm fine. I know my body." Her gaze fell on the wedding ring on her left hand. She brushed it gently with her fingertips. Then, without hesitation, took it off. "Oliver, sell this and use it to pay the bills. Song Corporation." Phineas's expression turned frigid, his voice sharp as ice. "Say that again?" The secretary responded cautiously. "The wedding ring Madame wore has been sold online. Someone bought it for 100,000 yuan. Crack. Phineas crushed the silver lighter in his hand, his cold gaze like a blade. "Buy it back." The secretary nodded quickly, gently closed the door, and quietly left. Phineas picked up the shattered lighter and threw it to the ground with force. His dark eyes brimmed with a layer of frost. "Jessica, you've really outdone yourself." JY Club. Seeing Phineas's dark, stormy face, his friends couldn't help but ask out of curiosity, "Phineas, didn't sleep well?" Phineas said nothing. He picked up a glass of liquor and downed it in one go. The friends exchanged glances. One leaned in and asked, "What's going on? Did Jessica come back?" Last time, Phineas had met them for drinks and didn't even touch a drop. The moment Jessica's mother was mentioned, he'd left in a hurry. Now he'd called them out again, whatever it was. If something had shaken Phineas's mood, it could only be Jessica. Phineas paused for a moment. A shadow flickered across his face. "No." Then he gritted his teeth and added, "But soon." She was already selling her wedding ring for money, clearly. Jessica couldn't survive without him after the divorce. Humph. Once she's sold everything valuable and runs out of cash, she'll come crawling back to him on her own. His friends had no idea what he was thinking. Someone brought up, "Phineas, Fiona said she couldn't reach you. Her birthday is in 5 days. She said you must come." "Not going." Phineas didn't hesitate for even a second. The two simple words left everyone stunned again. "Why not? Don't you like Fiona? From the looks of it, she's planning to propose. If you don't go, you'll regret it." "Come on, Phineas. No need to pretend with us. If you like Fiona, just go for it." "Exactly. We're all adults, no need to keep playing innocent. Everyone has a few flings on the side. Don't worry, we'll cover for you." Phineas found the chatter unbearably noisy, his expression growing more and more impatient. "No time. I'm waiting for Jessica to come back." All of them stared at him, wide-eyed. "Didn't your grandfather force you to marry Jessica to repay the Lee family's kindness? Don't tell me, you actually fell for her? Like her?" The wine glass in Phineas's hand wobbled, a splash of liquor dripping onto his knee. He lowered his gaze and scoffed lightly. "I'm just afraid she'll come back and throw another tantrum." Annoying. With that, he downed the rest of the liquor and slammed the glass down with a loud bang, his eyes hazy as he shouted, "Why the hell did Jessica get to file for divorce first? And she even dared to sell the wedding ring. When she comes back, I'm going to settle the score." Chapter 6. First People's Hospital, H City. Jessica had been home for 3 days before her illness relapsed. Oliver, unable to bear watching her suffer, forcibly sent her back to the hospital for treatment. On the hospital bed, Jessica slowly opened her eyes. Her vision was already blurry, only Oliver's silhouette was barely discernible. She tried to lift her hand, but the pain was so intense that tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Seeing his sister so gaunt and frail, Oliver's eyes reddened as he gently wiped away her tears. "Sis. Mom and Dad are gone. You're the only family I have left. Please, don't leave me too." Jessica saw his tears and tried to raise her hand to wipe them away, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't lift it. In the end, all she could do was reach out and grasp Oliver's hand, forcing out her words, "Oliver, I'm fine. Let's go home." She knew she only had 2 days left. As someone whose time was nearly up, it wasn't worth wasting more money on treatment. She couldn't keep being a burden to Oliver. Oliver felt like his throat had been slashed by 1,000 sharp blades. How could she be fine? The doctors said the cancer had spread throughout her body. The pain was unbearable even for an average person. She couldn't even breathe properly. Choking back sobs, Oliver muttered, "Sis. I told Phineas about your illness. He'll definitely get you the best specialist." They were divorced. Now Phineas could be with Fiona out in the open. Why would he spare another thought for his former wife? Jessica didn't want to hear any more cold sarcasm from Phineas on her deathbed. She gripped Oliver's hand tighter, repeating with effort, "Oliver. I want to go home. Take me home." Seeing her like this, Oliver could only swallow his heartbreak. "Okay, I'll take you home." Late night, Song family villa. Phineas jolted awake from a nightmare, the overwhelming realism of the dream suffocating him like a boulder on his chest. He had dreamt that Jessica had died. Something clicked in his mind. He got out of bed and rushed barefoot to the study, rummaging through the drawer for Jessica's most recent medical report. When he saw the words "no abnormalities detected," he rubbed his brows, the unease in his chest easing slightly. Jessica, a woman who downed 2 bottles of Baijiu and still lived, how could she possibly die? Yet staring at the now empty bedroom, he still felt a strange irritation settle in. Jessica had left, and it was like she had taken his sleep with her. For the past few days, he'd woken in the middle of the night every single time. Not once had he slept through till morning. Unable to fall back asleep, he unlocked Jessica's contact and called her number. The beep, beep, in the silence of night sounded unusually loud, increasing his anxiety with every passing tone. By the 3rd ring, when still no one answered, Phineas hung up with a scowl. Grabbing his coat, he left the villa and headed straight to the JY Club. At JY Club, Phineas sat, staring at his phone in a daze. Fiona leaned in shyly beside him. "Phineas." A strong jasmine scent hit his nose. Suddenly, he thought of Jessica. She never wore perfume. Aside from official events requiring makeup, she was usually barefaced. "Stay away from me," he snapped, frowning. Fiona heard the irritation in his voice and dared not get any closer. Phineas picked up his phone and called Oliver, but again, no answer. Annoyed, he stood up. "I'm heading out for a bit." Without another word to anyone, he walked alone to the terrace. Under the moonlight, shadows and light dappled the ground. Phineas rubbed his thumb across Jessica's lucky cat avatar on Instagram, his gaze falling on the scattered leaves below. Without realizing it, he crouched down. Soon, a small cat-shaped piece together from fallen leaves appeared, playful and lifelike under the pale moonlight. Phineas opened their Instagram chat, took a picture of the little leaf cat, and hovered his thumb over the send button, but didn't press it. After a few seconds of thought, he pressed his lips tightly together, locked the screen, and turned back inside. Outside the private room, Phineas was just about to push open the door when voices from inside drifted out. "Looks like Jessica's really given up this time." Phineas said she filed for divorce and even sold her wedding ring. Sigh. What's the point of loving Phineas so much? They've been secretly married for 5 years. If there was even a bit of affection, they'd have had kids running around by now. Inside the room, Fiona pretended to jest, but her tone was full of glee. Phineas values filial piety the most. If he hadn't promised Grandpa Song to repay his debt of gratitude, he would have divorced Jessica long ago. Phineas froze in place. His heart gave a sudden jolt, and his dark eyes turned unreadably deep. He pushed the door open. The room fell into abrupt silence. Fiona's face stiffened. She quickly changed the subject. "Phineas, my birthday party's in H City. Will you come?" H City. Jessica's hometown was also in H City. Phineas didn't know why, but he agreed without thinking. Fiona's eyes lit up, unable to conceal her excitement. So much so that when the party ended and everyone was leaving, she was still clinging tightly to Phineas's side. Phineas's gaze turned cold. He stopped in his tracks. Fiona was puzzled. Then she heard Phineas turn to his friends and say, "You guys take her home." Fiona was stunned. She hurriedly said, "Phineas, I'm going the same way as you." "Not convenient." "What's so inconvenient?" Phineas's gaze darkened. "The passenger seat is reserved for my wife. There's no place for you in my car." Chapter 7. Fiona's delicate face twisted in an instant. Watching Phineas turn to leave, she shouted after him, unwilling to give up. "Phineas, don't tell me you've fallen for Jessica? 5 years of marriage, how could there really be no feelings at all?" Phineas paused in his steps but didn't answer. He strode away without looking back. Song family villa. Phineas returned to the bedroom. The room was cold and empty. He tossed his coat onto the sofa with forced indifference. "Jessica, you better never come back." The room remained silent, with no response. Lying in bed, he tossed and turned before finally drifting off to sleep. Again, his heart suddenly clenched with pain. He woke in a sweat. He had dreamed once more that Jessica was dead. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Phineas picked up his phone and called his secretary. "Book me a flight to H City this afternoon." The secretary acknowledged the order. After the call ended, Phineas stared blankly at the stark white ceiling. He had imagined divorce before, but now that they were truly apart, that woman had somehow embedded herself in his very being. He clearly didn't love her, yet she haunted him like a ghost. Song Corporation. Mr. Song. These documents were signed incorrectly. The secretary nervously handed over the files. Phineas looked down and saw the signature he had written, Jessica. He froze for a long while, then scratched out the name and rewrote it. Today marked the 10th day since Jessica disappeared from his world. Ever since their marriage, apart from business trips abroad, Phineas had never been apart from Jessica for this long. Even when he was away, Jessica would still text him from time to time. He remembered the first year they were married. He was on a business trip in a coastal city in country Y when a tsunami hit, cutting off all communication with home. Jessica hadn't even taken off her stage makeup yet. She boarded a flight, traveling 12 hours just to confirm that he was safe. Phineas closed the file folder, unconsciously placing a hand over his chest. It felt strangely hollow, and nothing could fill it. H City. Jessica's symptoms had worsened. She was coughing up blood more frequently, and her body had withered down to skin and bones. April 4th, Qingming Festival. Not wanting to die in front of Oliver, she found an excuse to send him away. The system's cold voice echoed once again. Host. You will be erased at 4:44 p.m. on April 4th. Time until death, 5 minutes. Lying on a recliner, Jessica quietly awaited death. She opened her phone and noticed a missed call from Phineas. Other than that, there were no new messages. Jessica stared blankly for a moment, then realized the call was probably an accidental dial in the middle of the night. She let out a bitter laugh. Just one call record, and her heart had stirred foolishly. Suddenly, the phone rang, shrilly, urgently. At the same time, the system's metallic voice began counting down again. Erasure countdown, 10, 9. The ringing and the countdown intertwined like heavy blows to Jessica's heart. She never expected the final call of her life would be a video call from Phineas. Her hand clenched around the phone. A ripple of emotion passed through her chest. At the end of it all, she wanted one last look at the man she had loved for nearly 8 years, even if it was just an accidental call. Phineas. Jessica's voice was soft and tender. On screen, the usually composed man stared at her in disbelief, his voice trembling uncontrollably. Jessica, what the hell did you do to yourself? Before Jessica could respond, Fiona's bright, smiling face suddenly popped up on screen. Phineas, you actually came to H City early for my birthday. Jessica heard it clearly. The light in her eyes vanished in an instant. Her gaze went dull and lifeless once more. 5, 4. The next second, Jessica smiled, at peace. She opened her mouth to speak, but blood slipped from the corner of her lips. Phineas. I wish you happiness. Jessica. Phineas's voice cracked as he called her name. 1. Clack. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground. All the strength drained from Jessica's body. Her arms went limp and hung down at her sides. In the final moment before darkness swallowed her consciousness, she saw Phineas, his normally calm face twisted, eyes bloodshot, roaring her name through the screen. Chapter 8. H City Airport. Phineas's trembling fingers dialed Jessica's number again and again, but no one answered. Jessica, please, pick up the phone. Panic surged within him, reaching its peak. In his mind, he couldn't shake the image of Jessica's bloodstained lips as she softly wished him happiness. Fiona had seen that video too, the gaunt, skeletal version of Jessica. That's why she had deliberately stepped into the frame beside Phineas and said those words. Suppressing her joy, she tugged lightly on Phineas's sleeve, her face full of worry. Phineas, your wife. Before she could finish, Phineas suddenly shook off her hand, his bloodshot eyes glaring at her with fury. Get lost! Fiona cried out from the pain, cradling her arm. Phineas's deranged expression frightened her so badly she staggered back, not daring to get any closer. Phineas stumbled out of the airport, bumping into countless passers-by along the way, not even noticing. As he neared the Lee family home, a van sped out from a corner and slammed into his sports car. The violent impact threw his entire body forward, his head crashing hard against the steering wheel. Blood streamed down from his temple, trailing along his cheek. Through blurred vision, he saw a black hearse slowly driving out from the Lee residence. Phineas's gaze locked onto that vehicle. His lips moved repeatedly, whispering one name, Jessica. Cemetery. Phineas sat in a wheelchair, staring at the photo on the tombstone. His eyes froze. After a few seconds, he reached out and gently touched the black and white portrait. What happened? Phineas's voice was hoarse and dry. Late-stage pancreatic cancer. Oliver replied coldly. Oliver had just beaten Phineas senseless at the funeral. Now that the rage had passed and Phineas hadn't fought back, he could at least speak calmly. The words hit Phineas like a thunderclap. He stared blankly. That's impossible. Jessica's medical records showed everything was normal. How could it be late-stage pancreatic cancer? That's absurd. Oliver sneered. You think there's no chance of a misdiagnosis? Maybe, just maybe, if you had shown a little concern? I told you she was sick. Do you remember what you said to me back then? Phineas's heart clenched. Before he could respond, Oliver's voice came again, icy as ever. You didn't give a single cent. You made my sister, who was unconscious, personally go and beg you for money. Phineas's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but the words choked him. I thought she made it up as an excuse to get money, but he couldn't say it, not anymore. Phineas, my sister's only dying wish was to get the divorce finalized, to end her marriage with you. Phineas's eyes darkened. Bitterness bloomed in his chest. A faint, self-mocking curve tugged at his lips. He never imagined Jessica could be so utterly resolute. I don't agree. She's my wife. She always has been, and I won't marry anyone else. He paused, then stared intently at the gravestone, saying each word with firm resolve. Her ashes, I'm taking them back to Beijing. Oliver rejected him on the spot. No, her final wish was to stay here in H City, buried near our parents. Phineas's expression hardened, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. She doesn't get to decide. If I don't agree, she remains my wife, even in death. She'll be buried in the Song family's ancestral tomb. Looking at him now, Oliver could only laugh bitterly. Phineas, why are you lying to yourself? You still dare claim she was your wife? When you were stealing her resources to prop up your precious white moonlight, I didn't see a shred of guilt in you. Do you know, even when her mind was foggy from the illness, she kept mumbling your name? And you? My sister's final moments were spent watching you and your new love flaunt your relationship. Phineas, please, don't be disgusting. Let my sister go. Each of Oliver's words struck like arrows, piercing straight into Phineas's heart. His throat was dry and tight. He wanted to explain, but it was a misunderstanding. But Jessica was gone, and what good was a defense when the one who needed to hear it was no longer there? Oliver didn't wait for an answer. He turned and left, not wanting to see any more of the hypocritical man before him. Silence returned to the cemetery. Phineas sat alone in front of the tombstone for a long, long time. Jessica, you didn't want to stay in the Song family. You wanted to end our marriage. I'll respect your wish. Chapter 9. Silence blanketed the world, and a hoarse voice drifted away in the wind. As dusk fell, the cold breeze rustled through the air. Phineas pulled out his phone from his pocket and saw over a dozen missed calls from Fiona displayed on the screen. He frowned, skipped over her messages without a second glance, and dialed another number. The dial tone had barely rung when a calm male voice came through. Mr. Song. It was his secretary. Phineas spoke flatly. Investigate Jessica. Yes, sir, came the prompt reply. The call ended. Phineas wheeled himself forward, resting his forehead gently against the gravestone. Only after a long time did he slowly turn and leave. 1 week later, in the study of the Song family villa, Phineas sat at his desk, carefully reviewing the investigation files spread before him. The medical report with Jessica's name on it felt like a blade to the eye. Jessica really had cancer. His secretary began to report everything he had uncovered. In detail, Mr. Song, when Madam was admitted to the hospital, her condition was already at a terminal stage. According to the attending physician, she was discharged early because she couldn't afford treatment. Couldn't afford treatment? Phineas's heart jolted violently. He murmured, "Impossible. She managed the household for years. How could she not even afford medical care? I gave her a black card when we got married. It had 200 million on it." The secretary's expression turned somber. He walked over and turned to the final page of the file. Mr. Song, I checked the account records. The day after that card was issued, Madam Song transferred all the funds to the old Madam. The money was spent entirely at the casino. All these years, Madam has been covering household expenses with her own earnings. Whatever was left, she used to pay off the Lee family's debts. Phineas's heart twisted into a knot. His eyes grew hot, and his fists clenched tightly. If he had known this earlier, he and Jessica might never have reached this point. The secretary, noting Phineas's weary appearance, hesitated before continuing. Mr. Song, during our investigation into Madam's illness, we uncovered something else. What is it? Madam is missing one kidney. There's a donation record in the H City Hospital. Phineas's brows jerked upward, a dreadful premonition surging through him. His voice trembled slightly. Go on. We contacted the surgeon from back then. He confirmed that Madam specifically instructed him to keep the matter confidential. The recipient of the kidney was you. The moment the words landed, the air in the study dropped several degrees. Are you certain? Phineas's voice shook as he forced out the question. The secretary could feel the overwhelming fury rising from Phineas and answered with utmost caution, absolutely confirmed. He wouldn't dare report something like this falsely. The room fell into suffocating silence. A sharp glint flashed through Phineas's eyes. His palm clenched so tightly it trembled. If it was Jessica who donated the kidney, then Fiona had lied? All these years, he had repaid a false debt of gratitude by repeatedly wronging the woman who had truly saved his life? The one he trusted most had deceived him all along. Phineas slammed the documents onto the table, his face dark as storm clouds. He said coldly, "Investigate Fiona." The secretary acknowledged and quickly left the study. Phineas stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the starlit night, unmoving for a long time. As darkness fell completely, he sat in the unlit room, pretending to rest his eyes. 4 hours later, his phone rang. The secretary's voice came through. Mr. Song, we've completed the investigation on Miss Fiona. The report has been sent to your inbox. I see. Phineas opened the file and scanned line after line, his expression growing gloomier with each word. When he finished, he picked up his phone. It wasn't long before Fiona's delighted voice answered. Phineas, you finally called me. Phineas shut his laptop. His voice was flat and emotionless. Let's meet. Fiona softened her tone. Where? JY. After hanging up, Phineas drove straight to the club. JY Club. Fiona was fixing her makeup in a compact mirror. The moment she saw Phineas, her face lit up with joy and she rushed over. Phineas, you're here. Though he had treated her coldly these past few days, now that Jessica was dead, becoming Mrs. Song was only a matter of time. The thought made her smile even wider. Phineas handed her a folder. Fiona smiled, asking casually, "What's this?" "See for yourself." She opened it, and the smile on her face froze instantly, replaced by sheer panic. She looked up at Phineas, whose eyes were icy and murderous. The folder in her hand suddenly felt scorching hot. Her voice trembled. Phineas. Inside were records of her transaction with the anesthesiologist during Jessica's surgery and a falsified kidney donor report. Fiona clutched the folder tightly. Her lips moved, but no words came out. It had been 5 years. She thought the truth would never come to light. She hadn't expected it to be uncovered so soon. Her lashes trembled, her mind racing for a way out, but Phineas was already standing before her. He leaned in, one hand tightening around her throat, his gaze cold and deadly. Fiona, do you know the price of lying to me? Chapter 10. In that moment, Fiona felt her breath catch, completely stopped. Tears welled in her eyes as she sobbed, voice trembling. Phineas, everything I did was because I love you. Jessica just happened to be a match for your kidney. If I had been the match, I would have donated mine first. Without hesitation, her words drowned in tears. Fiona stared at Phineas with heartbreaking affection, her face full of sorrow. Her acting was exceptional. If not for the overwhelming evidence he had uncovered, Phineas might have been moved once again. Fiona, are you done with your performance? His voice was icy. He tightened his grip. Fiona's eyes rolled back. She felt like she was about to be strangled. Desperately, she clawed at his iron-like arms. Then came Phineas's chilling voice, low and venomous. Fiona, I have to admit your schemes were brilliant. You not only stole credit for Jessica's kidney donation, you even had your godfather destroy the Lee family, forcing them into ruin. You're the daughter of the Lee family's housekeeper, and you used such a vicious trap against the very people who raised you. Fiona, you shouldn't have used me, and you definitely shouldn't have schemed against Jessica. I will make sure you pay. Fiona felt a cold chill surge from her heels to the top of her skull, draining all color from her face. She had never imagined that Phineas would have the ability to uncover all the dark secrets she thought were lost to time and buried forever. Phineas, I was wrong. Please, forgive me. I love you. I only took those risks because I wanted to be worthy of standing beside you. Phineas suddenly spoke, his expression blank. Fiona, everything you have now should have belonged to Jessica. You don't deserve what you stole. Fiona froze. He flung her away with disgust, his voice coated in ice. You're nothing but a rat in the gutter. What right did you ever have to compete with her? I lifted you to that pedestal. I can drag you straight to hell. Suddenly, Fiona laughed bitterly, her voice turning manic. Ha ha ha. Phineas, how ridiculous you are. The one who hurt Jessica time and time again, wasn't it you? Phineas's heart clenched like it was gripped by an iron hand. His fingers trembled from the pain. Just then, there was a knock at the door, knock knock, and the secretary entered with 2 bodyguards. Mr. Song, Kevin has been drugged and is now in the next room. Kevin, Fiona's stepfather, and the one who destroyed the Lee family. Fiona's face instantly filled with panic. What are you going to do? Phineas's cold gaze swept over her. He waved a hand to the guards. Take them. Let the world see how fake her pure and innocent image really is. Fiona shrieked, her voice tearing from her throat. Phineas, you can't do this to me. I love you. Phineas scoffed. Fiona, the only reason I didn't look into you before was because I trusted you. Now that all your dirty secrets are exposed, I only feel disgusted. You and your mother shared a man for years. I'll let everyone know about your twisted desires. You don't have to sneak around anymore. With that, Phineas turned and strode out of the private room, ignoring Fiona's screams behind him. That night, videos of Fiona and Kevin's relationship were exposed online. Brand partners terminated her contracts en masse. In no time, Fiona faced lawsuits for breach of contract and a total career wipeout. Kevin's conspiracy to ruin the Lee family also came to light. Police arrested both him and Fiona. 1 week later, a photo of Phineas kneeling at Zhaojue Temple, completing 9,999 kowtows in prayer, went viral, shocking the entire business world. 3 years later, H-City Airport, Jessica stepped out of the terminal, wearing dark sunglasses and a deep green qipao that fluttered as she walked. Her graceful figure turned heads wherever she passed. 3 years ago, Jessica thought she had died. But unexpectedly, the system that had bound her for 5 years used all her accumulated points to trade for a chance at resurrection. When Jessica later learned that virtue could help the system earn points, She spent the next 3 years traveling the world, doing volunteer work. A month ago, the system finally gathered enough points to release her from their contract. Now, free from all restraints, Jessica decided to return to H-City to find Oliver. She smiled faintly at the thought of her younger brother choosing to study in H-City just to visit the family graves more often. At the exit, Phineas strode ahead, his secretary close behind, reporting updates as they walked. Mr. Song, Fiona's been diagnosed with kidney failure. Her condition is serious. Phineas frowned, then cut him off with an irritated scoff. That's her karma. Don't report anything about her to me again. The secretary immediately shut his mouth and nodded. As the two stepped out of the terminal, they happened to see a woman in a dark green cheapao getting into a car. Phineas froze. Jessica? Chapter 11. Before Phineas could react, the vehicle sped off, leaving behind only a blurred silhouette. He rushed forward but caught only the last few digits of the license plate and quickly committed them to memory. The secretary approached and, seeing Phineas staring blankly down the empty street, asked with confusion, "Mr. Song, is something wrong?" Phineas forwarded the plate number to her and ordered, "Find out who owns this car." Jessica had returned today to attend a charity gala the following night, invited by an international humanitarian organization. For the past 3 years, she had been a global mobility volunteer, collaborating frequently with international aid groups. She had known she might run into people from her past, but after repeated invitations from the hosts, Jessica could no longer turn them down. The next night, 9 p.m., cruise gala. Jessica took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, following the attendant slowly onto the cruise ship, wearing a pale mauve cheapao that made her skin look like porcelain. She drew every eye the moment she stepped on board. Suddenly, someone in the crowd gasped, "Mr. Song is here." The moment the words were spoken, all heads turned except Jessica's. She stood with her back to the crowd, her entire body tensing. Phineas was now not only the head of the Song family but had also reclaimed the Lee family's assets from Kevin. With countless industries under his name, he had become the man everyone wanted to curry favor with. As he walked in, many tried to start a conversation, but his powerful presence kept them rooted in place. Casually scanning the room, Phineas's gaze paused on a woman in a pale mauve cheapao ahead. His steps faltered. That graceful silhouette overlapped in his mind with the woman in the dark green cheapao he'd seen at the airport. For the past 3 years, Phineas hadn't touched a single woman. Instinctively, he asked, "Who is that lady?" Jessica clenched her fists out of view. She knew this moment couldn't be avoided. She had practiced this scene countless times in the mirror. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Song," she said, turning with a soft smile. "Hello, I'm Julia." In that instant, it felt like all the blood in Phineas's body froze. The next second, he strode forward, his cold voice laced with a faint tremble. "Jessica?" Jessica feigned surprise. "Mr. Song, do we know each other?" Phineas reached out to touch the face that had haunted his dreams for years. His fingers trembled as they brushed lightly over the small mole between her brows. "Jessica, when did you get this mole here?" That faint mark between her brows, left by the system upon her resurrection. Jessica quickly slapped his hand away. "Mr. Song, please keep your hands to yourself. I'm Julia, not Jessica. I hope you won't mistake me again." "Julia." Phineas mouthed the name, repeating it twice under his breath as he studied her from head to toe. Her aura was different from Jessica's, yet her face was exactly the same. "You must be mistaken, Mr. Song." The host quickly stepped in to smooth things over, positioning himself between Phineas and Jessica. "This is Julia, a longtime international collaborator with our organization. She just returned recently." That one sentence snapped Phineas back to reality. He regained his usual indifference and cleared his throat. "Miss Yoon, I apologize for the misunderstanding." Jessica waved her hand with feigned nonchalance. "I never expected to resemble someone named Miss Lee so closely. It's understandable that you mistook me." Phineas's gaze grew darker. "Perhaps." The host beamed. "Mr. Song, we have a collaboration project we'd love to discuss with you." "All right." Phineas nodded slightly, cast one last glance at Jessica, and followed the host away. Jessica let out a quiet breath of relief. Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and stepped into a quiet lounge before calling back. "Oliver," Jessica greeted calmly. Oliver's voice came through clearly, tinged with annoyance. "Did you see Phineas? And you could actually pull off that act in front of him?" Jessica arched a brow confidently. "Why not? I've spent 3 years perfecting this mask. How could I be exposed so easily?" Oliver scoffed. "With acting skills like that, you should have stayed in the entertainment industry instead of wasting time on him." "Don't tease me," Jessica laughed. "All right. I've got things to do. Talk later." She hung up and opened the door, only to see Phineas leaning against the hallway wall, a cigarette glowing dimly between his fingers. Chapter 12. Through the hazy white smoke, Jessica could feel Phineas's possessive gaze locked on her. Her heart clenched. Trying to stay calm, she asked, "Mr. Song, were you eavesdropping?" Phineas glanced at her indifferently and slowly walked closer. The smoke filled Jessica's nose, making her frown unconsciously. Ignoring her question, Phineas's dark eyes narrowed in curiosity. "Miss Yoon, do you hate the smell of smoke?" Jessica met his gaze without fear and smiled gently. "I think anyone who doesn't smoke wouldn't like the smell." With that, she walked past him directly, watching that familiar figure fade into the distance. Something stirred deep within Phineas. He stubbed out his cigarette. After the banquet, Jessica returned to her hotel and dialed Oliver's number. "Oliver, you have to keep my identity secret. Let's not contact each other for a while. And don't come see me." Oliver's anxious voice came from the other end. "Sis, what's going on?" Jessica thought of the probing look Phineas had given her earlier. A vague, unexplainable feeling lingered in her chest. "It's nothing. I just think someone might be looking into me now." After hanging up, Jessica couldn't sleep. She decided to go down to the pool to clear her head. As soon as she opened the door, she spotted someone leaning against the wall in the corridor. Head lowered, she couldn't see his face clearly, but the aura he gave off was sharp and imposing. Everyone on this floor was a VIP from the charity banquet, and the hotel's security was famous for its strictness. She wasn't worried about danger. "Who's there?" Jessica didn't approach. She tested the air with a question. The figure stirred. Before she could see clearly, he suddenly rushed over and hugged her tightly. Jessica's body froze. She spoke in a low voice, trying to keep calm. "Mr. Song, what are you doing here?" She had smelled that familiar cedar scent on him for 5 years. She didn't need to see his face to recognize him instantly. The sound of her voice seemed to jolt Phineas awake. He quickly let go, a dazed look in his eyes. "Jessie." Jessica's heart trembled. Her hand, resting at her side, unconsciously curled into a fist. That nickname, Jessie, was one Phineas used only during moments of intimacy, never in ordinary conversation. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of alcohol on him. "Mr. Song, you've been drinking?" She pushed him away with visible distaste. The next second, Phineas's body gave out and collapsed. Jessica stood stunned, staring at her palm. She didn't think she used that much force. Looking at the man now passed out on the ground and glancing again at the empty corridor, her mind was a tangled mess. After a long pause, she let out a deep sigh and struggled to help Phineas back into her room. After taking off his coat and shoes, she soaked a towel and sat by the bed, gently wiping his face and hands. Phineas stirred and opened his eyes. His gaze, still foggy, fell on her. His voice was hoarse. "Jessica." Jessica suppressed the ripple in her heart and forced a gentle smile. "Mr. Song, I'm Julia, but right now, you're Jessica." He stared at her stubbornly. Only Jessie would take such careful care of me. Jessica's chest tightened. Everything she was doing now was exactly how she used to care for him when he was drunk. If it weren't Phineas, she might have forgotten she wasn't Jessica anymore. She was Julia. Why would she care for a man she'd only met once? Startled, Jessica jerked away from the bed like she'd been shocked. She quickly put down the towel and called the front desk. "Have Mr. Song's assistant come to my room and take him away." Soon, the secretary arrived in a hurry. The moment he saw Jessica, he froze in disbelief. "Madam!" Jessica crossed her arms and said coolly, "I'm Julia, not Mrs. Song. Take your CEO and leave." Only when the door gently clicked shut behind them did Jessica's gaze fall away. Since returning, she had known she could deceive anyone easily, but in front of Phineas, there was always a sliver of unease. Phineas had a keen mind, and it was hard for him to trust people. Pushing her scattered thoughts aside, Jessica walked over and turned off the bedside lamp. A dreamless night. The next morning, Jessica went down to the restaurant for breakfast. Across the crowd, she spotted Phineas in an instant. Her heart skipped inexplicably. Her feet wouldn't move. She watched him walk toward her, his gaze locking onto her without hesitation. Mr. Song, Jessica smiled calmly. What a coincidence. You're here too? Phineas nodded and asked. How long are you staying in the country? I'll leave tomorrow. He hesitated for a moment. There are a lot of beautiful places here. Aren't you going to do some sightseeing? Jessica sighed softly. I have a tight schedule. I need to return early. As they spoke, they picked out a few light dishes and found a quiet window seat away from the crowd. Phineas, clearly distracted, reached for a pastry containing peanuts and was about to eat it. Jessica, reacting instinctively, stopped him. Don't eat that. It has peanuts. Phineas paused, glanced at the pastry in his hand, and his eyes darkened. How do you know I'm allergic to peanuts? Chapter 13. The air froze for a moment. Mr. Song, Jessica forced a few light laughs. Mr. Song, I've worked as an international volunteer. I've seen a lot of people with peanut allergies, just reminded him out of habit. Phineas looked at her deeply without replying, then gave a slight nod. Thanks for the reminder. As a token of appreciation, let me give you a black card to Datong Amusement Park. Datong Amusement Park had once been the Lee family's property, now it belonged to Phineas. The black card allowed unlimited access to all attractions. Jessica lowered her eyes to hide the emotion flickering there and smiled faintly. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Song. Just then, the secretary came running up, panting and pale. Mr. Song, Fiona escaped during her medical parole. Phineas's expression turned instantly dark, rage simmering in his eyes. Send someone after her. She's gone? Jessica's heart skipped. She knew Fiona, seemingly gentle on the outside, but dangerously obsessive underneath. Phineas turned his probing gaze on Jessica. Miss Yoon, you know Fiona? Facing those deep, searching eyes, Jessica's palms clenched slightly, but she stayed composed. Fiona's story has been all over the internet. I've read about it. Phineas held her gaze for a few seconds before looking away. The secretary, however, looked serious. Miss Yoon, please be careful. If Fiona sees you, she might. Jessica's face darkened. Why would she come after me? Phineas said quietly. Fiona went to prison because of my wife, Jessica. And you, this face, anyone who sees you would believe you are Jessica. For your safety, I'll assign bodyguards to protect you. Jessica stiffened, her gaze dimming. She pressed her lips together. Wife. They had signed the divorce papers long ago. Their relationship ended. He still had the audacity to say that word? Jessica rolled her eyes inwardly, suppressing her frustration. She needed to meet Oliver soon. There was no way she could have Phineas's people around. She smiled casually. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Song, but I don't like being watched. This is a law-abiding society. I don't believe Fiona would go too far. I can take care of myself. Phineas didn't insist but repeatedly told her to stay alert. Banquet hall. Tonight's charity gala included a silent auction, where some investors offered up rare collectibles to raise funds. To Jessica's left sat the composed Phineas. On her right, the up-and-coming tech mogul, Paul. After a few pleasant exchanges, Jessica and Paul discovered a shared interest. They added each other on Instagram. Phineas's eyes drifted to her phone and then coolly glanced at Paul. When the auction began, he and Paul started bidding against each other. As item after item's price skyrocketed, over 1,000 times their value, Paul laughed in resignation. In the end, Phineas outbid him on every single one. Jessica glanced at Phineas, speechless, only to see his smug, self-satisfied look. There was a sparkle in his eyes that made Jessica's heart skip a beat. She quickly turned away. After the event, Jessica chatted with Paul for a while before finally bidding him goodbye. She looked at the time, 10 p.m. Oliver, knowing she was flying abroad the next day, insisted on seeing her tonight. The parking lot was dimly lit. Jessica found her car and had just pulled open the door when a strong hand slammed it shut. A hot body pressed up behind her, pinning her against the car. The door slammed back shut with a loud bang. Phineas! That familiar scent made Jessica instinctively cry out. She elbowed the man behind her. A low grunt escaped Phineas's throat. He rasped. So you do know how to get angry? Jessica struggled out of his arms and glared at him. Those clear, bright eyes now filled with anger instead of affection. It unsettled Phineas deeply. He used to see nothing but tenderness in her gaze. Now all he saw was irritation and disgust. He couldn't stand it. Suddenly, Phineas leaned down, covered her eyes with one hand, and kissed the lips he had longed for all this time. Jessica froze for a moment, then began to struggle violently. The sting on his lips snapped Phineas back to reality. He let her go. Jessica wiped her lips furiously and slapped him hard. "Phineas! I don't care how powerful you are, you can't treat me like this. I'm not your woman. My name is Julia." Her eyes reddened. Her voice trembled with rage. "I'm sorry," Phineas murmured, eyes downcast. It was the first time he had ever apologized. The side of his face bore a red, angry mark from the slap, but he didn't show any anger, just calmly said, "I couldn't control myself. I can't stand watching you smile at another man." Jessica scoffed. "That's my business. What does it have to do with you?" Phineas clenched his fists, eyes shadowed with turmoil. He knew Julia wasn't Jessica. She had nothing to do with him. But seeing her laugh and chat with someone else made his chest ache unbearably. Jessica looked away from his swollen face, forcing herself to steady her emotions. "Mr. Song, we've only met a few times, we're not even friends. Please stop making assumptions and minding my business." She turned, reopened the car door, and prepared to leave. But behind her, Phineas suddenly said, "I can't." Her hand froze. "What do you mean? What are you trying to?" A low, firm voice cut through the night, each word deliberate. "I want to marry you." Chapter 14. Jessica's mind exploded the moment she heard those words, like a bomb going off in her head. She turned back, staring at Phineas in disbelief. "Phineas, are you insane?" She was completely shocked. In her memory, Phineas had always been a man of restraint and discipline. Back then, even in their shared bed, everything was orderly, down to how often they were intimate. Like a scheduled routine, she had never seen Phineas lose control. He always weighed pros and cons carefully before acting on anything. But now Phineas was saying these words, impulsively, just to a woman he'd only met once or twice named Julia. "If I'm serious, would you say yes?" In the stillness of the underground garage, even a pin drop could be heard. Phineas's words landed one by one, like heavy hammers, ringing loud and clear. No matter how seasoned an actress Jessica was, she momentarily froze, dazed, looking at the spark in Phineas's eyes. Jessica's expression turned serious. "Phineas, technically speaking, we're strangers." He stared at her without blinking and replied instantly, "I don't care." Jessica frowned deeply, taking time to think. "We're not even lovers. Why would you want to marry me?" Phineas answered without hesitation, "You look a lot like Jessica, so I want to marry you. I know it's selfish, but I really liked her. I loved her." Jessica's chest tightened. Her breath caught. Words failed her for a second before she instinctively refuted. "That's impossible." Phineas placed one hand on the car door, caging her in his arms, his gaze fixed on her. "Why is it impossible?" Jessica quickly regained her composure. "I heard you were always chasing after Fiona. You made her a rising star out of a nobody. Jessica was just someone you were forced to marry out of a debt to the Song family. How could you possibly have loved her?" Phineas's voice was low, steady. "What if we fell in love over time?" Jessica clenched her teeth. "Then you've only made her memory more disgusting." His eyes darkened. He leaned closer, the corners of his lips lifting in a cryptic smile. "Is that so? And how would you know what Jessica thought? Do you remember who you're pretending to be? Julia?" They were now so close. His breath brushed against her skin, lingering at her nose and lips. Jessica instinctively took a step back. She couldn't tell if Phineas was still suspicious of her, or if he already knew she was Jessica. Jessica forced herself to remain calm and shoved him away. "I'm just guessing. All womanizing scumbags think like this. Even if you really did love Jessica, I refuse to be someone's substitute." With that, Jessica flung open the door, climbed in, slammed it shut, started the engine, everything in one swift motion. The car sped off. In the rearview mirror, she caught one last glimpse of Phineas standing there, unmoving, eyes following her car as it disappeared. Jessica held his gaze for a moment, then resolutely turned her eyes back to the road. Those 5 years with him, no love, no tenderness, given a second chance at life. She refused to repeat the same mistakes. The next day, after lunch with Oliver, Jessica prepared to drive to the airport. Just as she was heading out, she received a message from Phineas. "Wait for me, I'll take you to the airport." Jessica stared at the text, feeling inexplicably annoyed. Her hotel and Phineas's villa were in opposite directions. Why go out of his way to take her? Besides, she'd made things very clear last night, they needed distance. She chose not to reply and tucked her phone into her bag, heading toward the parking garage. But just as she reached a column near her car, and before she could even press the key fob, someone suddenly clamped a hand over her mouth and nose from behind. Jessica tried to struggle, but her limbs were quickly going numb. The car key slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, but her mind remained conscious. "Get her in the car, now. Someone's coming," a voice barked inside the vehicle. Before she completely blacked out, she felt herself being dragged into a van. On the back seat sat a woman, familiar and unmistakable. It was Fiona. Chapter 15. Jessica woke up again, this time to a bucket of icy water poured over her. The cold seeped instantly through her bones. It was already deep into autumn. Jessica shivered uncontrollably from the chill. "Jessica, you're finally awake." A sharp, grating female voice came from above, each word squeezed through clenched teeth. Jessica looked up to see Fiona, her eyes filled with seething rage, as if she wanted to flay Jessica alive. Scanning her surroundings, Jessica realized she was in an abandoned factory. Several burly men stood around her. Escaping would be nearly impossible. Her gaze wavered, and her body, tightly bound, had no strength left. She bit the tip of her tongue, forcing herself awake. "I'm not Jessica. My name is Julia. You've got the wrong person." Fiona crouched down and suddenly grabbed Jessica by the jaw, shrieking, "Jessica, stop pretending. No matter how you've changed, I'll always recognize you. I'm going to make you suffer 100, 1,000 times what I've suffered." Jessica's eyes were icy cold. She spoke in a hard voice. "No one forced you to do what you did. You reaped what you sowed." Fiona screamed in hysteria. "Shut up." Her hand clenched hard. A sickening crack echoed as something in Jessica's jaw dislocated. Agonizing pain shot through her entire body. Tears streamed down her face, and cold sweat beaded on her forehead. She gasped sharply, biting her lip to stop herself from crying out. In this godforsaken place, she had to find a way to save herself. Taking a slow breath, Jessica softened her tone, trying to reason. "Fiona, what you're doing will only land you in prison for longer." Fiona pulled out a sharp dagger and toyed with it in her hand, her eyes filled with contempt. "I've come this far. You think I'll stop now, Jessica?" Jessica met her gaze, calm and composed. "Fiona, before I died, I asked Phineas for a divorce. I left the Song family. I gave him back to you, and despite everything you took from me, I never resented you. I've been more than fair." Fiona shrieked. "But you shouldn't have let Phineas know the truth. I could have become Mrs. Song." Jessica froze. "What truth? You're still pretending." Fiona growled with hatred. "After Phineas attended your funeral, he learned everything. For 5 years, the kidney donation was never exposed. You must have told him before you died. To avenge you, he ruined me without mercy. He destroyed everything I had. Jessica, after what you did to me, don't I deserve revenge?" A crazed gleam flashed in Fiona's eyes. "You think Phineas will still want you if he sees you tangled up with random men? Ha ha ha. I'll make you feel the sting of public shaming. Why should you, the pampered rich girl, be adored? I'll turn you into a filthy slut no man wants." Her lips curled into a twisted smile. "Turn on the camera. This woman's a celebrity, been with countless men. Don't feel sorry for her." As the thug's eyes lit up with sick desire, Jessica backed away in terror, struggling with all her might. "Fiona, you're insane." But it was useless. The men closed in, pinning her down. Despair cracked through her defenses. Jessica trembled uncontrollably, every cell screaming with fear. Then, blaring sirens echoed through the warehouse. The men panicked, stumbling to their feet. "Shit. Someone called the cops. Run." Chaos broke out as they scattered in every direction. They grabbed Fiona and fled toward the back door. Jessica! The warehouse doors burst open with a loud bang. Blinding light flooded the space. Jessica turned her head at the voice. Phineas was rushing toward her, panic etched on every inch of his face. At that moment, tears streamed down Jessica's cheeks, her voice hoarse. She called out, "Phineas!" After 3 years, hearing that familiar name again stopped Phineas in his tracks. The next second, the man who had been cold and distant for 5 years pulled her tightly into his arms. That familiar embrace, that familiar scent, instantly shattered every layer of fear in Jessica's heart. She nestled into him, clinging to his chest like a lifeline. Phineas lowered his voice, trying to keep it steady and gentle. "Jessie, it's really you, isn't it?" Chapter 16. Jessica sobbed uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't say a single word, just nodded softly. A wave of overwhelming joy surged through Phineas. He pressed a heavy kiss to the top of her head, voice hoarse as he murmured apologies over and over again. "I'm sorry, Jessie. It's my fault. I didn't recognize you right away. I'm sorry, Jessie. I didn't protect you. I let you be frightened. I'm sorry, Jessie. I was too late. I'm sorry, Jessie. I didn't realize my feelings for you. I was blind and foolish. I missed you. I'm sorry, Jessie. I swear, I never had romantic feelings for Fiona. I'm sorry, Jessie. I'm unforgivable. I kept hurting you even though I cared about you. I was a coward who didn't dare admit I loved you. I'm sorry, Jessie. Everything was my fault, all my fault." His words tumbled out in a mess, incoherent from emotion. His breathing turned heavy and rough, but each syllable, so full of guilt, made Jessica feel strangely safe. Her racing heart began to calm. Half an hour later, Jessica was taken to the first hospital. After the examination, the doctor turned to Phineas. "Nothing serious, just rest and recover for a while." Phineas hesitated, then asked, "Are there any other symptoms? Like late-stage cancer or something?" The doctor shook his head. "We did a full checkup. Miss Yun's physical condition is normal, no abnormalities." Phineas nodded, offering sincere thanks. Once the doctor left, the room was quiet, just the two of them. Jessica gave a faint smile and glanced at him. "Thank you, Mr. Song." Phineas's face darkened. He took her hand tightly, brows furrowed as he questioned her. "What did you call me?" "You're Jessica. What should you be calling me?" Jessica knew she couldn't hide her identity anymore. She took a deep breath and gently pulled her hand away. Her voice was quiet. "Mr. Song, we've been divorced for 3 years." Without hesitation, Phineas pulled out the divorce agreement he'd kept with him, ripped it into pieces right in front of her. "We're not divorced." This moment, he had rehearsed it 1,000 times in his mind. He now understood it was his blindness, his pride, his refusal to acknowledge his feelings, that had caused him to lose Jessica. He'd married her to fulfill his grandfather's dying wish, and convinced himself again and again that their relationship was just a contract. He never realized he had long since fallen for her until she was gone. When he'd heard the news of her death, it felt like his entire world had collapsed. That suffocating grief had nearly destroyed him. Jessica stared at the torn divorce papers in silence, then looked away, not wanting to argue with him further. She changed the subject forcefully. "Did you catch Fiona and the others?" Phineas looked into her tear-soaked eyes, and his heart ached deeply. "They've been caught. She won't have a chance to get out again." His voice turned hoarse. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault for letting you suffer so much." Jessica turned to the window. The ginkgo leaves fluttered down in the autumn wind. Her voice was slow, but steady. "Phineas, I'm Julia now. I don't want any more ties to the Jessica from the past." A few days later, Jessica's facial injuries had healed. Now that everything had come to light between her and Phineas, she simply requested to be discharged and returned to the Lee family estate. No longer staying in a hotel. Just as she arrived home, her phone rang. It was Phineas. Even though they'd already had that difficult conversation at the hospital, he acted as if nothing had changed. There was a trace of concern in his tone. "Where did you go?" Jessica replied coolly. "I felt fine, so I left the hospital and came home." Phineas was quiet for a long time before replying. "All right, next time, tell me." There was a subtle hint of frustration in his voice. Jessica's expression hardened. She responded with a tinge of annoyance. I'm not a child, and why do you care so much anyway? Phineas was stunned into silence. His lips moved for a moment, but he said nothing in the end. He and Jessica had no relationship anymore, and now, nothing he said would matter to her. Yet he still felt a restless ache in his chest. Time passed, and the line remained quiet. Finally, Jessica said, I need to rest. She hung up, tossed her phone aside, and went to the garden to water the flowers. Half an hour later, as she returned from the yard, she looked toward the gate, and froze. Standing there was Phineas. Her eyes widened. What are you doing here? Chapter 17. Phineas noticed the dirt on Jessica's hands and realized she hadn't checked her phone. With an ingratiating smile, he said, I texted you. I said I was coming over. Jessica saw his hands full of bags and hesitated for 2 seconds before stepping aside to let him in. Phineas naturally began unpacking the ingredients and organizing them neatly. Jessica looked on in disbelief. You came to cook? She stared at him like she had just seen the sun rise from the west. Phineas, of all people, always elegant and borderline obsessive about cleanliness, actually in her kitchen? He cleared his throat awkwardly. You're still recovering. You need to eat light. Jessica eyed him suspiciously. You, cooking? Are you here to poison me? Seeing her look of utter disbelief, Phineas's gaze flickered. Then he straightened and said with more confidence, I took a crash course. Should be fine. When Oliver returned home, he walked into the scene of Phineas, wearing an apron, making a complete mess in the kitchen. Meanwhile, his dear sister pretended to watch TV, but kept sneaking glances toward the kitchen, the corners of her mouth curling upward uncontrollably. Hey, Jessica, my lovely sister, are you planning to get back together with him? Are you seriously going for the whole ex-lovers reunite thing? What's the term for it, right? Broken mirror restored. Jessica shoved her brother's head away, annoyed, and avoided the question. Instead, she asked, Didn't you have a basketball game this afternoon? Why are you back already? Oliver flopped onto the couch and pointed at the kitchen with his chin. He transferred me $1,000,000 to come home early. He gave too much, and besides, playing ball's not as important as spending time with my sister. Jessica didn't bother exposing his money-hungry motives. An hour later, Phineas wiped the sweat from his brow and called them to eat. Jessica noticed his reddened fingertips from cooking and felt a ripple of emotion she quickly tried to suppress. Oliver took one look at the table full of boiled and steamed dishes and curled his lip. You're kidding, right? This is it? I've got zero appetite. Phineas calmly wiped his hands with a napkin and said indifferently, This meal was made for Jessie. Translation, it wasn't made for you. Eat or don't. Oliver glared at him and, in retaliation, grabbed the fish head and dumped it into his own bowl. Meanwhile, Phineas had already deboned the tender belly meat and piled it all into Jessica's bowl. Watching her bowl nearly overflowing, Jessica quickly covered it with her hand as he was about to add a chicken drumstick. That's enough. I can't finish it. Phineas froze, then smiled dotingly. All right, I'll stop, for now. Finish that, and I'll give you more. Oliver rolled his eyes in silent protest. After dinner, while Oliver washed the dishes, Phineas pulled out a folder and placed it in front of the siblings. These are the Lee family's assets. I've been managing them for 3 years. It's time to return them to you. Jessica looked surprised. Why? Ever since Phineas had taken over the Lee holdings, their market value had skyrocketed. For a businessman like him, why would he give up such a valuable pie? Seeing the doubt in her expression, Phineas raised an eyebrow. What? You don't want them? Jessica quickly shook her head, laughing. Of course I do. It's just, Oliver and I aren't exactly business-minded. It would probably grow better in your hands. Phineas looked at her intently, his tone calm yet firm. Jessie, these were always yours. They'll keep you and Oliver secure for life. Take them. Otherwise, I'm afraid one day you'll do what you did before. He didn't finish the sentence, but Jessica understood. Before, because she had no money, she gave up treatment. Her eyes turned red as she stared at the folder. Gripping it tightly, she lowered her gaze and whispered, Thank you. Seeing her tear up, Phineas gently wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Teasing. Little crybaby. Jessica's face flushed, and she glared at him playfully. Oliver groaned dramatically. Ugh. Seriously? You two are feeding me dog food right after dinner? Jessica slapped his arm. Flustered, Oliver shouted, exaggerated and loud. This is outrageous. Public displays of affection in broad daylight. Ding dong. 1 million yuan received via Alipay. The notification echoed through the living room. Oh my god, the single dog has been paid. Time for a walk. Sis, don't wait up. With that, Oliver bolted out of the villa like a gust of wind. Jessica turned and glared at Phineas, who was casually putting down his phone. He walked over and sat beside her, eyes deep as the sea, locking onto hers. I've returned the Lee family's assets to you, he said softly, his voice magnetic. Now, will you return Jessica to me? His low, steady voice struck directly at her heart. Jessica froze. The hand holding the folder trembled slightly. I'll think about it. Chapter 18. Seeing that Jessica hadn't outright rejected him, Phineas silently exhaled a breath of relief. His gaze lingered on the side of her face as he cautiously asked, Jessie, do you still want to act? Jessica paused for a moment, then lightly pressed her lips together and replied softly, Of course I do. Phineas's heart gave a faint jolt. The glory that once belonged to Jessica had been stolen by Fiona because of him. It was his selfishness that had stalled Jessica's path to stardom. But now, there would be time. He would help her rise to the top of the entertainment world. Half a month later, Phineas cleared an entire day from his schedule to personally drive Jessica to a follow-up appointment. What he didn't expect was for a massive truck to come barreling straight toward them shortly after they left the villa. Instinctively, Phineas slammed on the brakes. Nothing. The brakes had been tampered with. He hadn't noticed it, and Jessica was in the car. Her jaw had just healed. Her comeback was only beginning. How could he let her endure another blow? A raw, bone-deep fear suddenly surged through him. What if something happened again? What if she was really taken from him this time? Could he save her again? Glancing at Jessica, her face pale with terror, Phineas whispered hoarsely, Jessie, I love you. In the next second, he gripped the wheel tight and yanked it violently to the right. The tires screamed against the pavement with a horrifying screech. Jessica cried out instinctively, Phineas! Then she watched with her own eyes as Phineas twisted his body around to shield her from the impact. Bang! The world spun. Jessica jolted violently in her seat, but strong arms locked around her, keeping her safe. The sharp scent of blood filled her nose, but she couldn't see Phineas's face clearly. Panic overwhelmed her. Clutching his shirt tightly, she sobbed, Phineas, are you okay? Phineas's hands trembled as he cupped her face. His voice was anxious. Jessie, are you hurt? Where does it hurt? Jessica stared at him in a daze, tears pouring down. I am fine. But even as she said that, she cried harder. Phineas, you're insane. What if something happened to you? What would I do? Phineas kissed the tears from her eyes in comfort. Blood from his forehead trickled down, covering his brow. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, they saw their reflections mirrored in each other's gaze. Phineas pushed himself up, reached for the passenger door. Be good. Get out first. Jessica grabbed his arm frantically. What about you? Come with me. He went quiet, his eyes locked onto her, as if committing her to memory forever. The car was crushed and could ignite at any moment, and he wouldn't gamble with Jessica's life. He looked away, changed the subject. You first. I'll follow you. Jessica didn't believe a word of it. Her eyes darted around the road, and then she saw it, a sharp iron triangle piece on the ground. She bolted from the car, calling emergency services while grabbing the iron shard and wedging it under the crumpled driver's door. Even as the jagged edge cut into her palms, even as pain radiated from her skin, Jessica didn't stop. Phineas's pupils shrank in horror. He shouted, Jessica, stop it! Don't you care about your hands? But Jessica ignored him, clenching her teeth as she pried at the door. With a loud creak, the door shifted. Phineas shoved it open from the inside and crawled out, immediately pulling Jessica into his arms. She hugged him back just as tightly, then suddenly remembered the strong scent of blood from earlier. She stepped back, looked down, and her heart stopped. Phineas's thigh had a deep gash. Flesh was torn open. Blood was pouring out. Jessica froze, afraid to move, terrified of worsening the injury. Carefully, she helped him to the side of the road, easing him down onto a stone step. There were still no passing cars. She suddenly regretted agreeing to live at this remote island villa. As she thought about it, her anger flared. She turned and snapped at him. "Why do you treat your body like it's worthless?" Phineas turned his head slowly to look at her, his eyes heated, unwavering. Then he grasped her injured hand, calloused and raw, and kissed it gently. "Jessie, let's start over, okay?" Chapter 19. Jessica pressed her lips together, a flush rising across her cheeks. Her hand burned where his had touched it. And for a moment, she couldn't even speak. That strange, searing warmth crept all the way to her chest. It felt like a giddy little deer was bouncing around in her heart, refusing to calm down. Phineas suddenly acting this sweet? It was way too off-script. Totally illegal behavior from the usually cold, arrogant Mr. Song. Before long, the ambulance arrived at the scene. At the hospital entrance, the medical staff quickly wheeled Phineas inside. After getting her own hand treated, Jessica refused to leave his side, waiting right outside the operating room. Even though she knew his injury wasn't serious, she couldn't help but worry. Her eyes stayed fixed on the surgery room doors. An hour later, in the hospital room, looking around the familiar space, Jessica sighed softly. "Can't believe it's been less than a month and we're back again." Only this time, the one in the hospital bed was Phineas instead of her. Phineas looked at her with a gentle smile, his voice comforting. "I'm fine." His injuries weren't serious, but Jessica insisted on keeping him in the hospital for proper recovery. Hearing his nonchalant tone, Jessica snapped. "A gash that wide, so many stitches, and you call that fine?" The always imposing Mr. Song obediently closed his mouth, lowered his head, and let her scold him without a word. Jessica's eyes drifted to his bandaged leg, and she let out a quiet sigh. "Do you know who did this?" Phineas didn't want to trouble her with such matters, but looking into her clear, sincere eyes, he couldn't hide it. Rubbing his brow, he said slowly, "Business rivals." Jessica crossed her arms, the hint of anger rising in her voice. "I hate it when you brush me off like that." Phineas froze for a beat, then sighed, gently taking her uninjured hand and rubbing it between his palms. It could have been Kevin or someone Fiona hired. Jessica's mind went blank for a second. Come to think of it, ever since their reunion, Phineas had gotten a lot more touchy. Still, she snapped back to reality and frowned. "Kevin? I took back the Lee family assets from him. He and Fiona, well, it's all tied to her." Fiona? Even now, just hearing that name made Jessica instinctively tense up. Images of Fiona's manic, twisted expression flashed in her mind. Someone like that, who had completely lost reason, anyone would be afraid. She looked at Phineas anxiously. "So, what are you going to do?" Just then, the secretary knocked and entered with a thick folder. Seeing the pile of documents, Jessica stood up quickly. "You guys go ahead. I'll step out." But Phineas reached out and held her uninjured hand, his tone firm with disapproval. "You're injured. Where are you going?" "The culprit hasn't been caught. Stay by my side, okay?" Caught off guard by the secretary's amused expression, Jessica bit her lip and sat back down obediently. Only then did Phineas look at the secretary. "Go on." The secretary handed over the documents respectfully. "Mr. Song, the truck driver died on the spot, but we had hackers check his computer and phone." Jessica stared expectantly. Why does this guy always talk in pieces? Can't he just say it all at once? Phineas had already flipped to the crucial page. As his eyes passed over the content, his gaze turned icy, his face darkened, and his voice dropped low with menace. "Don't let a single one of them go." The secretary nodded and left with the files. Phineas couldn't even imagine the possibility of Jessica getting hurt in front of him. Even the hypothetical made his blood run cold. But it hadn't been hypothetical. It had actually happened right under his watch. His face was stone cold now. He would make every single one of them pay. Jessica knew his anger was rooted in how deeply the car crash had shaken him. To soothe him, she leaned up and planted a soft kiss near his eye. "Don't be mad anymore." Then, blinking innocently, she asked, So who did it? I'm dying of curiosity. Why is everyone being so cryptic? Phineas paused, then gently enclosed her hand in his. It's too dirty, he said softly. I don't want you to hear it. Chapter 20. HM? The more he said it like that, the more Jessica wanted to hear it. She looked at him eagerly, her expression practically screaming, "Tell me." Phineas couldn't help but chuckle helplessly. He gently squeezed her hand. All right, I'll tell you. The truck driver was a fanatically obsessed fan of Fiona. The mastermind behind it all was Kevin's son. Jessica blinked, confused. Kevin's son? Was it revenge for his father? I thought they didn't get along. Phineas shook his head slightly, voice calm. They both had close ties with Fiona. They did it all for her. Fiona had been involved with both father and son. No wonder Phineas didn't want her to know. Jessica's emotions twisted into something complicated. Her nose wrinkled in visible disgust. Seeing her scowl and the utter revulsion on her face, Phineas chuckled. He took her hand and rubbed it against his cheek. He tilted his chin, voice deep and low. Kiss me again, and you'll forget all those disgusting things. That magnetic voice coiled in her ears like a feather brushing across her heart, tingling and soft, sending shivers through her body. In Phineas's deep, starry eyes, emotion shimmered. When he saw Jessica staring at him in a daze, he curved his lips in a smirk. Then he reached behind her head, pulled her close, and lowered his head for a fierce kiss. Jessica's eyes flew open wide. She pushed against his shoulders with all her strength. But to Phineas, her resistance was like a kitten pawing at him. Useless. Eventually, she gave up, let herself melt into his arms, and, justifiably, began to enjoy it. Phineas opened his eyes just slightly, watching Jessica's helpless expression. His movements became more aggressive, as if he wanted to consume her whole. After 3 years of abstinence, now that he was finally holding the woman he loved, he wanted nothing more than to make up for lost time. But with his legs still injured, he couldn't do anything more intense, for now. Kisses would have to do. Jessica clutched his collar instinctively, her entire body limp in his arms, wrapped in his scent. In the quiet room, only the sound of kisses and shallow breaths filled the air. The kiss lasted a full 10 minutes before Phineas finally bit down gently on her lip and reluctantly pulled away. Jessica was panting softly, her face flushed bright red. Phineas rubbed her swollen lips with his thumb, gently wiping away the moisture at the corners of her mouth. Then he cradled the back of her head, his forehead resting against hers. Do you remember what I said to you? He asked softly. Jessica blinked through her blush, dazed. Huh? Phineas had said so many things, it was impossible to know which one he meant. Besides, after that kiss, her brain was just mush. He whispered hoarsely, "We're back together." Jessica pursed her lips and said nothing. Phineas bumped his forehead against hers again, then kissed the tip of her nose. You don't need to answer now. When you think I'm worthy, then say yes. He paused, voice turning more serious. Also, one more thing. My mother was the one who took the money from your black card. I didn't know. I've sent her to Countrywide to be looked after by my father. She'll be staying there for the rest of her life. That will never happen again. The weight of his words struck Jessica hard. It took her a full minute before she snapped back to reality, meeting the sincerity in his eyes. Her heart gave a faint tremble. Should I give this one more try? She didn't answer him directly. Instead, her eyes flicked to his injured leg and she said mildly, "When you're better, we'll see." Phineas immediately caught onto her tone. There was no rejection. His heart, heavy for so long, finally landed safely. As long as there's a chance, he thought, he'll win her heart back, completely. Now that everything was out in the open, the atmosphere between them turned warm again. Phineas's gaze fell to her still red, swollen lips. His eyes darkened. Fingers slowly brushed against them with deliberate slowness, just as he was about to lower his head for another kiss. TSK. If you're gonna get all lovey-dovey, at least remember to close the damn door. A crisp, cool male voice echoed from the doorway. Chapter 21. Oliver's voice rang out suddenly. Startled, Jessica instinctively shoved Phineas away. In her fluster, her hand accidentally pressed on his wound. Phineas let out a low, muffled grunt of pain. Jessica panicked. What happened? Did the wound reopen? Should I get the doctor? Her face was filled with anxious worry as she got up to leave, but Phineas gently held her hand and reassured her softly. Jessie, I'm fine. She carefully studied his expression. He looked calm and composed. Only then did she settle down a little. Oliver placed a fruit basket on the bedside table and cast a deliberately slow, loaded glance at Phineas. Phineas lazily lifted his eyes to look at him and said in an annoyed tone, "What are you doing here?" Clearly displeased by the interruption. Of all the times he could have shown up, he had to pick now? Oliver folded his arms. Not answering immediately, his eyes shifted to Jessica. Jessica, of course, sensed his burning stare and tried to stay calm. She raised her eyes. What? Without saying a word, Oliver turned his phone toward them and showed a trending headline. Explosive. Has-been actress Jessica spotted with song group heir, definitely suspicious. Sources claim Mr. Song was already married. Damn, Jessica involved with a married man? Phineas's face darkened as he pulled out his phone and started typing. Jessica's expression turned complex. She and Phineas had been in a hidden marriage for 5 years. Not once had they been photographed together. No one even knew they were married. Now they were divorced, and this was the moment they finally got papped together. Strangely, Jessica actually thought the photo looked pretty good. She pulled out her phone and quietly saved it to her gallery. But that subtle little move didn't escape Oliver's notice. He let out a laugh of disbelief. I knew it. My love-struck sister is hopeless. Oliver plopped down on the sofa, casually tossing an orange in the air. So, what now? Then, with a tone full of schadenfreude, he added, seriously though, y'all were invisible when you were married. Now you're divorced. And boom. Trending. Phineas looked up from his phone and said flatly, I clarified it. Jessica blinked, lowering her gaze. Her emotions were hard to untangle. Back then, Phineas had been plagued with endless rumors about Fiona, and he never once cleared the air. But now, just one picture and he was already scrambling to make things right? Oliver, half doubting, opened his phone, and the moment he saw it, he blurted, Holy sh! Jessica frowned. Oliver. No swearing, but Oliver pointed at Phineas, utterly indignant. Sis, you really need to see what this guy just posted. Jessica hesitated, then opened her phone. The top trending tags had all shifted to ones about Phineas. She clicked into Phineas's official verified Instagram account. The big red check mark under the Song Corporation CEO title. His latest post read, My love, at Jessica. What? Didn't you all know? Jessica is my wife. I love her like crazy. Important things need to be said 3 times. I, Phineas, have not divorced Jessica. We are not divorced. Still together. I have nothing to do with Fiona. If I must be labeled, call me a helpful neighborhood watch guy. Yeah, I was blind and heartless before and made Jessie suffer a lot. But I'm making up for it now. Keep talking nonsense and I'll send you all cease and desist letters. Nobody's tearing us apart. And that wasn't all. The comments under his post had also climbed the trending charts. Hashtag cold CEO Phineas persona collapsed. Hashtag song group CEO claps back to protect his wife. Hashtag Phineas in desperation mode goes full husband bot. Oliver read through the comments with glee, clicking his tongue from time to time. Netizens flooded the replies. Am I hallucinating? Iceberg CEO Phineas turned into a chatterbox? Wait, so they almost divorced? Are they getting back together now? Low-key, they look great together. Heard Jessica's a rich girl who entered showbiz after her family went bankrupt. I'm kinda shipping this pair. And hey, even with song group behind her, Jessica never pulled strings, just acted steadily with solid skills. Jessica didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She turned off her phone and gave Phineas a long, wordless look. Phineas ignored Oliver, the third wheel, and pulled Jessica into his arms. He buried his face into the crook of her neck and whispered softly, I just want to earn the right to claim you. Back then, it was Jessica who had insisted on keeping their marriage a secret. She didn't want her success to be attributed to the Song family name. Jessica leaned into his embrace and wrapped her arms around him in return. The corners of her lips curled up. Chapter 22. Song Family Villa. Phineas had been kept in the hospital by Jessica for a whole month. It wasn't until the doctor confirmed his leg had healed well enough for a 3,000-meter run that Jessica finally allowed him to be discharged. Jessica had just stepped inside the door and hadn't even put her things down when she felt an intense gaze behind her. She turned around and saw Phineas approaching step by step. His dark eyes locked onto her like a beast about to pounce. "Coming home, you know what that means." Phineas loosened his tie, his voice hoarse and heavy with desire. "I'm giving you a chance to back out." Jessica's eyes darted around in panic. She clutched her belongings to her chest like a shield, too afraid to meet his gaze. After a while, she pressed her lips together, set her things down, and suddenly rushed forward, tiptoeing to give him a kiss. Instantly, Phineas's eyes darkened. The next moment, Jessica was pinned to the sofa, their lips and tongues wildly entangled. 5 minutes passed. The corners of Jessica's eyes were red, a sheen of tears clinging to her lashes. Dazed, Jessica felt Phineas's scorching hand lift her dress, sliding up to her waist. The heat of his touch made her shiver involuntarily. She arched her soft body slightly, pushing against him, and murmured in a breathy voice, "Not here." Phineas paused, then let out a low chuckle. The moment she heard him laugh, Jessica realized how shameful her words had sounded. Embarrassed and annoyed, she shot him a glare and lightly pounded his chest with her fist. Phineas kissed her flushed lips in reassurance, then lifted her in his arms and carried her to the master bedroom's large bed. Lying on the bed, Jessica was just about to say something, but her words were sealed with another kiss. In the room, only fragmented sounds remained. Much later, Phineas lifted her soft, boneless body with a satisfied smile. "Let's get cleaned up before sleeping." Jessica's gaze was unfocused. She had no strength to answer, simply slumping against him as he moved her around. Within moments, she had fallen asleep. Halfway through the bath, Jessica was awakened again, furious. She bit Phineas on the shoulder and snapped, "Beast! I'm so tired." Phineas chuckled, not stopping his movements. With a deliberately pitiful look, he said, "Jessie, have a little pity on me. I've held back for 3 years." Jessica's ears turned crimson at once. She gave him a playful glare. She didn't say anything more. Her resistance weakened, and she even lifted her aching waist to meet him halfway. Jessica's obedient response only made Phineas's movements more intense. He wished he could absorb this delicate woman into his very blood and bones. Not until dawn's first light painted the sky did Phineas finally lay her back down on the bed, planting a kiss on her lips. "Good girl. Sleep now." By the next evening, Jessica slowly opened her eyes as golden sunlight streamed through the window and spilled onto the bed. Bathed in this warm light, she slowly came to, but the moment she moved, her entire body felt like it was falling apart. Jessica struggled to sit up and noticed a note on the nightstand from Phineas, saying he had gone to a meeting at the company and would be back soon. Staring at the note, she was momentarily stunned. This was the first time Phineas had voluntarily informed her of his whereabouts. In the past, she always had to ask his secretary. For the past 5 years, the secretary had been the bridge between her and Phineas. Everything related to Phineas, she had learned it through the secretary. Snapping out of her thoughts, Jessica realized Phineas had changed a lot. Maybe, just maybe, he really would be different this time. Thinking that, Jessica pushed aside her heavy thoughts and got up to freshen up. However, when she saw her body full of red marks in the mirror, she was furious. When was Phineas going to drop this habit of biting? He even left marks on her calves. Fuming, she stormed out of the bathroom only to catch sight of a thermos cup on the table. Opening it, she found a decent-looking seafood porridge inside. A light bulb went off in Jessica's mind. Remembering the meals Phineas used to cook for her, she wondered, could this porridge be made by him again? The thought alone completely melted away her anger. She immediately sat down and began eating spoonful after spoonful. Just then, her phone rang. Chapter 23. The incoming call was from Phineas. Jessica bit the tip of her spoon, then answered coldly, "What do you want?" After all the emotional roller coasters he'd put her through, did he really expect a warm welcome? Phineas was taken aback for a second before he replied in a gentle voice. "Awake? I'm coming back soon, just wanted to ask what you'd like to eat." That deep, familiar voice instantly melted Jessica's irritation, and she began rattling off her cravings. "I want base, and white-cut chicken, and barbecue, also McDonald's." Phineas chuckled softly. "Got it. Oh, by the way, Oliver said he couldn't reach you last night. He's waiting at the door now, go let him in. Jessica froze, immediately checking her phone. Sure enough, there were over a dozen missed calls from Oliver. Last night's chaos left her no time to notice. She huffed in frustration. TCH. All Phineas's fault. I'm hanging up. She ended the call and quickly headed to the dressing room to change. To her surprise, besides her original clothes, there were now 2 large new wardrobes filled with brand new, still tagged outfits. Even more outrageous, there was a transparent display case filled with different styles of Maneki Nico, lucky cats. At the very top, there was a photo dated from 3 years ago. In the photo, under moonlight, a little cat made entirely of carefully arranged leaves was captured vividly. A warm current flowed through Jessica's chest. Jessie! Jessica! You awake yet? Oliver's booming voice echoed from downstairs. Jessica's heart jumped. She hurriedly changed and rushed down. At the door, Oliver eyed her outfit with a suspicious squint. Isn't it kinda warm today? Why the turtleneck? Jessica instinctively tugged at her collar, cheeks flushing. It's already autumn. Oliver narrowed his eyes, clearly suspicious, but seeing nothing too out of place. He dropped it and followed her into the yard. Jessica let out a quiet sigh of relief. When Phineas returned, he brought someone with him, a woman, the renowned film director Camilla. Jessica blinked in shock. The woman's loosely tied bun and stray locks gave her a quirky charm. Phineas stepped up and gently tucked Jessica's loose hair behind her ear before turning to Camilla with a smile. My wife, Jessica. Snapping back to her senses, Jessica quickly straightened up and bowed slightly. Hello, I'm Jessica. Please, have a seat. Camilla smiled, sat down, and got right to the point. Jessica, I'd like to invite you to be the lead actress in my new film. Listen, Jessica was stunned. She deeply admired Camilla, and had only briefly mentioned it to Phineas in passing. She never imagined the opportunity would come true. Without hesitation, she bowed sincerely. Thank you, Camilla. Camilla stayed for dinner, then left. After seeing her off, Jessica and Phineas strolled slowly back into the yard. Jessica gave Phineas's arm a light pinch and scolded. How could you go buy barbecue and McDonald's in front of Camilla? She's like my idol, you embarrassed me to death. God knows. When she saw the secretary holding barbecue and fast food behind Camilla, she wanted to dig a hole and crawl in. Phineas bent down and kissed her on the corner of her lips, smiling. I don't care what others think, I only care about what you want to eat. Relax. I bumped into her at McDonald's, told her it was me who wanted it. Lately, Phineas had completely leveled up, sweet talking came effortlessly. Jessica gave him a playful glare, but didn't press further. Phineas smirked, lacing his fingers through hers as they walked hand in hand back into the living room. Inside, they were greeted by the sight of Oliver sprawled on the couch, playing video games. Phineas's brow twitched. Why are you still here? Oliver didn't even glance up. Jessie said I could sleep here tonight. Phineas turned to Jessica with a wounded expression. She gave a soft huff and pretended not to see the look of grievance and unfulfilled desire in his eyes. Suddenly, Jessica tugged Phineas toward the sofa and nudged Oliver with her foot. Once Oliver sat up, Jessica cleared her throat. Aren't you too curious how I survived 3 years ago? 3 years later, award ceremony. Jessica, through her own hard work, finally took home the Best Actress award, earning the title of Best Leading Actress. She walked up the stage amid thunderous applause, glowing with pride and elegance. Her smile deepened as she saw Phineas sitting in the front row, holding the trophy. She beamed and said warmly, Tonight, I'd like to thank my husband, Phineas.